Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We're talking about cloud computing at Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, and we're talking about specific programs. Lewis, I'm going to throw it over to you at the Navy. You top-lined a lot of different activity that's going on there. Would you like to highlight one program that sort of unlocked this capability for your community?
Yeah, absolutely. Like Paul said, I'm going to come back to the flank speed tenant for a moment, but highlight a different aspect. So it's best known as the Office 365 solution that we brought online after CBR was decommissioned.
Okay.
And that's unlocked a lot of capability in terms of collaboration and shifting us out phone conferences and phone bridges and VTCs into a digital native collaboration space that we're still, learning to fully exploit. But that's not the only thing that it got us. Putting aside the productivity applications, the cyber defense and cyber awareness capabilities are very strong. They really transformed the way our Navy cyber operations defense group does business. Because for the first time, especially as we've modernized our endpoint monitoring and compliance, we have near real-time telemetry, very rich identity attributes that are coming in. So not only is the horizontal scale and the vertical scale increase, but the types of things that they can look at and the automation. Because when we talk about scale, like I said before, you can't really scale agility up, but we can automate. We can talk about cattle, not pets. And so when we bring the right tools into place and we modernize the business processes to get at that automation, it can really be transformative. So for the cyber defense folks, when there was, first there's just the awareness, seeing a lot more configurable alerts, potential positives, things like that. The time to respond and being able to trace precisely which node in the information environment is triggering is orders of magnitude better. The reduction in time and effort. I mean, the previous dynamic was literally flyaway teams and talking about days or weeks of teams of people going over and touching things physically with their fingers. And now, obviously the vast majority of that can be automated. So the cost to do what we did before greatly reduced, the ability to do more greatly increased. And I think that comes back to a lot of the discussions on what's the business case for cloud. People still trot out cost savings. And I say, maybe there's a cost basis savings, but there's also a massive mission backlog of stuff that we're supposed to do that we can't do. So you're not going to harvest that cost basis savings. You're going to reinvest it and get to where you actually want to be from a mission performance level. And that's what we've seen with cyber defense.
Sure. I mean, the value of opportunity cost is endless in this case. That's for sure. Dave, you see this capability again striped across a variety of agencies. Would you like to highlight one for the listening audience here?
Sure, and I'll go back to my platforms kind of theme for the day. And Luke, as you know, TSA is kind of near and dear to my heart. So the TSA Serve You program, human capital program over at the agency for hiring and all employee management functions, right? So what the TSA was able to do over there is use the best of breed kind of SaaS platforms for what they're good for, right? So advertising jobs out to TSOs, potential TSOs, recruiting, hiring, those kinds of things, Salesforce. They deploy the app in Salesforce. That's how they do recruiting and hiring that. The processing of employee actions once you're hired from hire to retire is a complex workflows. And you heard Jonathan talking about the ServiceNow and its ability to handle complex workflows. That's a ServiceNow application. And what they were able to do is deploy both of those applications with a AWS-based backend to handle the telemetry coming from them saying, hey, we just hired this employee. That's an important event. Comes to the AWS backend, gets processed in the data lake, and then gets put into ServiceNow for any other employee action. So what TSA was able to do, and they've sped up their hiring a lot, was use the best of breed kind of SaaS platforms or PaaS platforms, even in this case, to solve that use case.
Fantastic use case, and I love the adoption of the merging of the technologies from tip to tip there. Shane, how about at Citizenship and Immigration Services? A lot of different use cases there. Give us one example.
I think the most recent one, people tend to think of immigration as fairly static in terms of its implementation by law and statute, things like that. And there's some truth to that.
Until there's 12 policies that change, right?
Exactly. Or
Sure.
Political world events change.
Okay.
The most recent ones being Afghanistan and Ukraine. Both times USCIS was called into action with very, very limited time notice. And in fact, I think with Ukraine, we were told start to finish, we needed to deploy an entirely new workflow to ingest a series of 16,000 applications coming in from Ukraine alone, and we had 10 days to do it. Now, this workflow was not a simple form. It was far more than that. It had to have all the logic built into it. It had to be able to reach out to multiple systems, not just within our enterprise, but across other enterprises. It had to make decisions based on that information, and then adjust that workflow accordingly. So there's a tremendous amount of logic, like real-time logic, that needed to be there. Start to finish, we did it in 8 days. So,
Wow.
The kind of capabilities that USCIS brings to bear, a lot of it's just based on long experience with Agile and DevOps and how we approach problem setting. But I can honestly say when they first dumped this on us, the first response you got from anybody in USCIS was like, "Oh yeah, we can do that." It's that kind of can do, will do attitude that we have really come to see that cloud enables. There's a few problems that we haven't been able to solve that cloud doesn't provide some level of backing for us to do it under. Things that we just simply couldn't have done. We never could have done something like this 10 years ago.
Right.
Years.
And really unlock it at the speed that you're talking about, the velocity.
It really is just that velocity and the ability to scale it. Because it's not just about the workflow, it's about the number of people who are going to be hitting the system that we weren't used to before. On an average month, USCIS sees externally about 16 million people or so hitting our systems in different forms of fashion. That's kind of our service community, if you will, plus all of our internal clients, our internal users. So, for us, though, that's just a normal day of doing business. So even though this is a massive spike in load on us, honestly, the cloud, the way we scale, the way we were able to, push out the various services and functions across the various, services and platforms that we utilize, it was a normal day. It's like, oh yeah, we did that. Now let's go back and do something else.
Yeah, just be able to lean on that framework that you all worked so hard on putting together so that you could be ready for a situation like this.
Absolutely.
We're gonna wrap it up, and we always like to talk about sort of the future. And who better to start us off than Yvonne? You all at Red Hat have been there since the beginning of this journey on adopting this technology, extensive private sector and public sector capabilities. What's it look like in 2 to 3 years? What's that demand signal that you all are focusing on and are going to be implementing over the course of the next 2 and 3 years?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting 2 or 3 years. I think that honestly, recession is top of mind for everybody in the tech industry right now. Every morning we're waking up to news of hiring freezes and layoffs. And obviously our heart goes out to those individuals. But in the macro, it makes me think about how that could impact the mission of government. Will this slow innovation? Will we see a brain drain in tech that makes us fall behind the technological capabilities of our foes? So it's not just the people, right? It's we've been in several years of boom in tech, and we've seen a proliferation of small companies and startups, and that's going to be really tough for these next few years in terms of the recession. And so there's risk there as well. I do think there is a silver lining in this, and I think there's an opportunity for us to drive cloud adoption. It's imperative for government to have a cloud-enabled workforce. And it's been really difficult to do that because of the fluidity and inflation in the tech job market over these past few years. Maybe if we're deliberate about recruiting from some of these folks that are unfortunately affected, folks could have an opportunity to serve their country and bring some of that innovation to government. And I think that's a really exciting opportunity for me, and maybe a place where we could be deliberate about doing cross-pollination between industry and government. As for Red Hat's focus, I think we are very much zeroed in on edge. Obviously much of what DoD does is edge in some fashion, and we've been a longstanding partner in supporting that. But we're doing some really exciting things lately, like getting OpenShift and Kubernetes up in the International Space Station. We've been working really closely with the integrator community on AI/ML at the edge. Lockheed Martin's created a drone, for example, that not only does image processing on board, but they can actually deploy new models in flight to adapt to their context. So there's a lot of tremendously exciting stuff that's happening at the edge. And the one thing that also really excites me about edge is it's inherently an ecosystem play, right? It requires hardware vendors, software vendors, integrators, and government to collaborate around a single use case to bring these solutions to bear. And so I think that's great. At the end of the day, we're all on the same team, and I think coming together to collaborate to give the best advantage to protecting our country is something that I'm looking forward to. So
The promise is endless. I really do appreciate it. David, how about at Deloitte Consulting? Paint the picture 2 to 3 years from now.
Yeah, I mean, Yogi Berra said it right. It's tough to make a prediction, especially about the future, right? So I love the outer space Kubernetes. That's awesome. ML, Edge, they're all on my list. Stuff we expect, I think. Something I will throw out there that I'm starting to keep my eye on, and object storage has gotten so fast in its latency, right? That I wonder, right, what that does to the database management industry, right? So I can do schemaless queries across a vast array of object storage with very, very low latency right now. Why am I reformatting things into a data warehouse structure that I don't need, right? That's an interesting thing I'm going to keep an eye on, and I know AWS has made a lot of advances there in their S3 network. The normal stuff, I get edge, machine learning at the edge, and then I think I'm going to keep an eye on the database technology, and just because that's getting so fast.
Good catch there, Jonathan. You all have rolled out a tremendous amount of capability there. What can we expect 2 to 3 years from now in regards to the capability that'll be unlocked and enabled using your platform?
So I think the overarching story is going to be platforms of all kinds. And as David noted, more and more are utilizing platforms. But what are they going to be doing on the platforms? I think there's going to be I think we're going to see low code application development be the norm for agency mission applications of a certain kind, right? There's a level of complexity where maybe you need to build something from scratch, but many of the applications I worked on during my career are things that are based on workflow that can be built using low code tools. The challenge for CIOs, I think, is to have good guardrails and governance as these tools stand up and they're presented out to a program office to use. So, there's comfort that things will be developed in a way that they can be managed well over time. And I think you add to that low code movement, this idea of hyper automation, bringing different technologies together on a platform like ServiceNow, again, to interact in a way that they can't as their standalone technologies. So you have something like RPA, you have workflow, you have AI. You put these together on the ServiceNow platform, and you can really automate business processes end to end. And to the extent that we have to focus our employees on different tasks as the environment changes, as government requirements change, the more automation of the simple things, I think that's a very positive trend. And I think we're not taking away people's jobs. We're getting people focused on more important work, the most important work of an agency. And we can do that on ServiceNow today. And I think over the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to see more and more situations where agency leaders turn to ServiceNow and hyperautomation and low code. So IT workers or workers in the agency can focus on the most important tasks that they have at hand, which serving the mission, supporting people during what we expect to be a very challenging time for the country.
Citizen development du jour, no question about that. Lewis, how about at the Navy? If I'm coming out of the Naval Academy, I'm a freshly minted sailor, et cetera, what am I going to expect to see in a couple of years?
Well, I think the first thing is to really fully unlock the promise of cloud at scale. We talked about how that needs to be through empowering folks at a low level to do what they need to do, and having easy access, automation, small batch capability. I'm not as concerned with particular technologies as I am with the culture of technology adoption. And we've really been pushing the use of technology investment horizons to say a lot of our arguments about optimization and what's prioritized and what's valuable are really this Horizon 1 stuff that we're already doing at scale, or the things that have improbably survived prototype and pilot to be on the brink of Horizon 1. We don't talk a lot about the different care and feeding we need for those Horizon 2 items going across the valley of death and transition that are promising, but we don't know how scaled they'll get. And the Horizon 3 activity, where you're seeing these new technologies and business processes come in, are almost in their own ecosystem that's really disconnected from the rest. And very rarely do we actually talk about Horizon 0, which our CFOs love, about what you're going to turn off, whether that's a cost avoidance or cost savings. So that strategic portfolio view about, we always have new technologies we want to experiment with, and we really want to shine a bright, nurturing light on those Horizon 2 items to get them into Horizon 1. That's a big shift for us. We've typically not had all those value ends. If I had to make one prediction, though, it would be that we're going to see this shift under Zero Trust start to mature, that we're not going to have digital platforms built around networks. We're going to have them built around identity and data. As others have said, really micro-segmented, robust data rights, digital rights management, data loss prevention, attribute-based access control, so that we stop starting our conversations about network diagrams and really focus on who are you, what rights do you have, whether you're a person or a non-person entity, and how do we ensure that a wide range of data, potentially very significant data, are fused or exposed to you in the right way at the right time.
All the accoutrements that architecture affords us. Thank you for that, and thank you for your service. Dr. Lucas, one thing that you all did do is you shut down a data center, as you were describing. You're implementing all these various cloud capabilities. Where are you going to be at the Department of Homeland Security 3 years from now?
I think what's going to happen, Lucas, as we make the more strategic decisions to use those cloud environments, is we're going to start seeing an abstraction of infrastructure layer everywhere. And folks are going to stop talking about infrastructure across the board. And it's just going to be about services. I mean, a lot of times people use government services and the systems may be clunky or they may not work appropriately. But as we continue to innovate in the cloud, that seamless transition to the technology to stay at the speed of implementation will actually help us to deliver that for the customers. I think what's inevitably going to happen positively for the taxpayer in this nation is you're going to start seeing services being focused on rather than the systems. And I think that's going to be a fundamental shift from what we have.
Appreciate that, and appreciate all your service as well. Shane, you all have been focusing on that operator, that user, that benefit seeker for quite some time now. What can we expect 3 years from now? What's it going to look like?
Well, first I agree with all the things my fellow panelists have said. I think that those are all really great points. It's hard to predict the future, but I can tell you what USCIS is focused on, primarily to solve problems, what we see, the problems we're faced with today and the ones we perceive to coming at us for the next few years. I really do see the rise of quantum computing to be a significant game changer. Not just, there's been a lot of talk about it from the security perspective about it, how it can crack encryption and all these things, but I also see the value add that it has with dealing with vast quantities of data. And immigration is a vast quantity of data. We are already looking to quantum technologies and how we can leverage that, where we're going to go with that technology. It really does offer us a better way of doing business, a faster way of doing business. And it's going to be able to allow us to do things that we currently are kind of restrained by, just given the data lakes that we deal with. I think if I'm also looking, obviously edge computing has been mentioned several times. For USCIS, that's even more so. The vast majority of the world lives in rural areas. And a good number of those people, we don't service the American people as much as we service the world because of the nature of our mission. And so we have to really think about that, and how do we take the services and the access that we need to provide these people as part of our mission set and get it into their hands, literally. So that edge computing, the ability to leverage and get the computing into their, into their hands and getting it closer to them is going to be really critical. If I'm putting my CISO hat back on, I see secure access service edge being a really critical component. Talked a little bit about security in this conversation today, but I tried to not just talk about my day job. So, but it is going to be, it is for us now a very critical piece for how we deliver services and how we go approach problem setting, especially on the IT security side. And the final thing I'm going to bring up, and I think that it's been talked about a little bit, but again, it goes back to the 16 million or so people that we service every month. We need to make sure we start putting, getting them access so they don't have to route all the way back to, a central location in Northern Virginia. We need to get cloud regions pushed out. And so we're leveraging things more closely to our end users. It's something we're exploring now. It solves a number of problems, not just the data access thing from a cyber resilience piece. It is really, really where we need to be. Very difficult to do. I'm going to be honest about that. But it is something that we're focused on. I know that is going to be part of our future.
Appreciate that, Shane, and appreciate everything that you do for us. Paul, you're going to take us home at the U.S. Army here. And I thought it was a great catch that you've laid out a framework. You don't have to predict a future on the desktop, for example. 2 to 3 years from now, what are you expecting in regards to this journey that you're on to unlock this capability for all the soldiers out there?
Yeah, I'll probably double down on the you don't need to predict the future piece. I think of the quote whenever I hear this question of William Gibson of the future is here, it's just not very evenly distributed. And I think it's our job to break down those barriers to make it more evenly distributed, right? I could try and take a swing at the next 2 to 3 years. I'll tell you what I hope to be the case. I'll tell you the goals. The goals is that the people responsible for implementing this technology understand the opportunity with that technology, why that technology makes sense for the problem that they have, and what outcome they're trying to achieve with that technology. We can talk about, we're implementing a SASE capability as well. We're talking about openness cloud capabilities. We're talking about our ability to lean into data as a strategic asset. But if we don't understand that there is a mindset and a skill set challenge that we have today, right, we're not going to realize that future, or it'll be so unevenly distributed. Just the few that get it will be able to lean into it, but this value needs to permeate across the entire federal government. And so that's what I think are the biggest challenges that we can do today that we can essentially unpack today, is understanding that there is a skill set and a mindset challenge, right, of what could be, not just what works, but why it works, right? One of my favorite books when I was growing up is The Way Things Work. Bought it for my kids. And it's not just driving a car from here to there, but why does this thing work the way that it works? How does it have value? When we talk about the vast landscape of technology that's out there, we need to understand why it works for the problems that it's solving. And only then in 2 to 3 years can we see people truly leveraging the value of data as a strategic asset, truly see interoperability where it doesn't matter where you go, you can have online on-demand data and services wherever you go. Customer experiences are amazing. People have a product mindset when they deliver capabilities across the DoD. We have quick lead times between ideas to fielded solutions that demonstrate value for the mission. People and our skill sets and our mindsets are the things that's going to unlock that opportunity in the future. So that's where I hope we go.
Really looking forward to that promising future. And I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules today to join us on this program, both the federal executives here and our partners together fighting the good fight. So I really do appreciate that. I'd like to thank the sponsors for supporting us on this show. I'd also like to thank the good people here at Federal News Network that make this program so successful and enjoyable. And most of all, I'd like to thank you, the listening audience out there that tune in every month. You've been listening to the Federal Executive Forum, part of the Federal News Network.